A group of blind men heard that a strange animal called an elephant had been brought to the town, but none of them were aware of its shape and form. Out of curiosity, they said, "We must inspect it and know it by touch, of which we are capable." So they sought it out, and when they found it, they groped about it. The first person whose hand landed on a trunk said, "This being is like a thick snake." For another whose hand reached its ear, it seemed like a kind of fan. As for another person whose hand was upon its leg, he said, "The elephant is a pillar like a tree trunk." The blind man who placed his hand upon its side said, "The elephant is like a wall." Another who felt its tail described it as a rope. The last felt its tusk, stating, "The elephant is that which is hard and smooth like a spear." Each one of these blind men had a perspective on what the elephant was, and yet each one of them didn't have enough perspective to know exactly what it was. I find it interesting that Jesus, when he went in his earthly ministry, would often use real life events to communicate a deeper spiritual reality. Yesterday during my house church, we had a time together where we read part of John chapter 9, a story about a blind man, and we had a discussion about it afterwards. And I had some new ideas that the Lord gave to me that I had never thought of before. Let me read the passage to you, and then we can spend a little time discussing it. It says that as Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with mud, and he said to him, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed, and the man came back seeing. It's very interesting that as we walk through our lives, we come upon many trials and tribulations. We come across things that are difficult to walk through, things we don't understand, and we ask the question again and again, why is this happening? And what we often do is we narrow it down to a few particular options and we say, well, it's this or it's that. And truthfully, we never really know. And of course, in this story, we have a man who was born blind, and we have the disciples of Jesus asking, why was this man born blind? Was it because his parents sinned or because he sinned? And what we actually see is that Jesus goes on to heal the man by spitting on some mud and watering it down a little bit, making it moldable, and he puts it on his eyes, and the man goes and washes in a pool and comes back and he can see. Now, what's interesting is if Jesus just wanted to heal this man, he could have done that. There would have been no need for everything else. But Jesus was looking for this opportunity, was looking for this situation to happen. He was looking for the question to come. And of course, the question is, was it this man that sinned or his parents that he was born blind? What a limited, narrow perspective that the people of Jesus' time had. You see, that's the way they thought. If someone was born with some sort of genetic defect, then it had to be the result of the parents sinning, or the result of the man sinning. Maybe it's something that happened in utero. We don't know, but the thought was that someone had sinned, and that's what had caused this. And this creates a little bit of a false dilemma, because there's no other option, according to the disciples, for why this man could be born blind. And what it does is it limits their perspective of who God is. And so I think what Jesus was trying to do was highlight an area of spiritual blindness, an area where perhaps the disciples had blinders on and they could only see one or two ways that this could actually happen, which ultimately, if you think about it, there was really only one way. They thought it was because of sin. But the reason that they thought this way is because they had a man-centered perspective on the world instead of a God-centered one. In fact, any suffering that you and I see today, if we have a man-centered perspective, none of it makes sense. And it makes us ask questions like, why would a loving God allow these terrible things to happen? Why would he allow people to be raped and tortured? Why would he allow people to get sick? Why would he allow people to die? Why would we allow people to be hurt in all sorts of different ways? And so it doesn't make a lot of sense from man's perspective. But if we look at it from God's perspective, it begins to make a little more sense. You see, God's perspective here was that this man was born blind so that God could communicate, number one, the limitations of people's ability to see the reason for why we suffer. It was to make known to them their spiritual blindness. But at the same time, it was also to create an incredible miracle situation where God could show his love and his grace and his mercy in such a wonderful way by taking a person who was born blind and giving him sight. It was a way of shining a light on Jesus. Jesus, the one who was to be and was the light of the world. And so looking into our situations today, we often find ourselves wondering, why is it that I suffer? Why is it that there is suffering going on? And we don't have the answer. I want to challenge you today, when suffering comes or when questions come about things, instead of just trying to figure it out on your own and determine if there's some human reasoning why this is happening, perhaps go to God and say, God, why is this happening? I'm going to tell you, God's not always going to give you the answer. In fact, he doesn't often give us the answers to those things. But God does begin to give us some perspective. It's like the bird's eye view, or the view from being up in a hot air balloon and looking down on the world around us. Ask for God's perspective. God will give you peace as he reveals his perspective of things to you. Don't allow our limitations and our spiritual blindness to keep us from seeing where God is at work and what he is doing in the midst of suffering. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.